Dear colleagues, I think we will restart now the session of the afternoon. I think you've been very well engaged during the lunch, so that's good. I will leave the floor to my colleague, Ana Hidalgo Simon, who is going to moderate this session on ATMP, which stands for one more abbreviations, Advanced Therapies Medicinal Products. And please, again, keep your question, but please ask a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes, and welcome back, everybody. Nice to have everybody in the room already. Nobody wants to miss the beginning of the next section. So we are going to have 2 more presentations and lots of time for questions now as well. And this session is focusing on a particular type of product. So we are going to be touching in many elements of areas that we have seen this morning, and a lot of elements of areas that you are going to be hear about tomorrow. So this is a focus made on the type of products. And the reason for that is because, as most of you in the room will be very well aware, those are the newest, most interesting, most promising therapies. I am very biased, as you can tell, because I'm coordinating the actions for the agency and ATMP. So I will think that they are so interested. But it's a fact well known that the products coming that are more likely to be game changers for therapy in the world in the next few years are going to be ATMP. So my name is Ana Hidalgo Simon. I head the Department of the Specialized Scientific Disciplines. And as I say, I lead the ATMP activities. It's a full matrix of people in the agency working in this area. So we have to put together one specialist in therapeutic areas, regulatory affairs, legal, quality, toxicology, clinical pharmacology. It's a full collection of us with a special focus because those are areas where a lot of new stuff is happening and a lot of questions. We have to find our way. And what we have to do is to fit the ATMPs into the already well-established pathway or procedures for approval medicine. So the first presentation is going to be given by my colleague here, Patrick Silis, who is a doctorate pharmacologist. He actually has been in the agency a long time and always around this area of ATMPs, and is the current secretariat of the CAT, the Committee for the Advanced Therapies, which is our committee specifically for these products. So, Patrick, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Anna says that she is biased. I'm even more biased because I have been dealing with this type of products for at least the last 10 years, if not longer. This is the session between your lunch and the coffee break, so I hope it's interactive and interesting enough to keep you all awake. So let's start immediately. And then also I have been given the message that I should try to go as fast as possible. Some of the slides I will therefore just highlight and will not go in detail, so there is more time for questions. Okay, so what I will try to explain in the next half hour max is what are ATMPs and why are they so different from other medicines? And this links to the second question, why do we need special legislation for this one? Why, if they are medicines, not just deal with them under the standard pharma legislations. I will conclude with a couple of slides on 2 specific procedures for advanced therapy medicinal products. So that is ATMP classification, ATMP certification. This will link in with the next presentations, which will talk more about how are we going to help the developers of ATMP. So what incentives do we have? What frameworks do we have behind so to help the developers to get those innovative products on the market? So that's a bit the link to presentation number 2, which Anna will give afterwards. So let's start here, a presentation on the beauty of, or the beast, or perhaps the genes and the cells. Now, like said, we have this special category of medicinal products, advanced therapy medicinal products, which are defined in Europe as gene therapy medicinal products, somatic cell therapy medicinal products, and tissue engineered products. Now, very shortly, the advanced therapy products either gene-based or cell-based. The gene-based will be starting from nucleic acid. It says here DNA, but it can also be RNA. Treatments are very broad. I put here just a couple of them. In inherited diseases, it's easy to understand. Cancer therapies, I'm now referring more to the genetically modified cells, which are also gene therapies. The CAR-Ts are a very relevant example of this one. But even in the area of tissue regeneration, gene therapies are being developed. We have some ophthalmological products being developed to avoid the loss of eyesight. For cell therapies, this is just a cartoon. It's not comprehensive at all, but you see that tissues can be used and are used for a lot of indications, from the simple skin repair, so that's the artificial skin, long there, cartilage repair, so chondrocytes for cartilage repair. A lot is tested, but probably not so successful for cardiac repair. Cancer immunotherapy, of course, that's the dendritic cells type of products, but then a whole range of other indications, immune diseases, neurological diseases, and so on. Like said, not comprehensive at all. The next couple of slides, and I will go a bit faster here, is products we have approved in the different classes. Gene therapies, we have approved quite a lot already now, even though there are a few products. We have approved products for in vivo gene therapy. So very simple, you have a DNA construct, often a vector, a viral vector, and you inject that in the patient for an intended function, in this case to replace a missing enzyme. First product approved worldwide, I think, gene therapy was Glybera. We have also a couple of ex vivo gene therapies, and there the situation is slightly different. Instead of injecting the vector directly in the patient, you take patient cells, bring them in a lab, bring them in contact, transfect them with the vector, and then give the transduced cells back to the patient. So here we had the product Strimvelis approved for the treatment of children with ADAS-Kit. So this is this severe immune deficiency in children. We have also approved somatic cell therapy products, and a relevant example is Provenge. This is what is routinely or colloquially called cancer vaccine, but we tend not to use vaccine for this type of product. So we call them cancer immunotherapy. So what is there is this is dendritic cells that are loaded by, with a cancer antigen. The dendritic cells will present cancer markers on their surface, and then the aim is to provoke an immune response against the cancer. And tissue engineered products we have approved as well. A lot of cartilage repair products, so chondrocyte containing products. But a nice example is the product Holoclar. And this is for the treatment of patients with severe limbal stem cell deficiency due to burns, ocular burns. And what this is taking a small biopsy from the healthy eye, culturing, expanding the cells, and re-administering then a tissue that consists of stem cells and other cells. So quickly to wrap up, ATMPs in Europe are considered medicinal products, so that is important because that's not the same in all regions in the world, based on cell and genes. They are very different from our normal medicines, the chemicals and even the biological biotechs. And just this as an example, the little dot, I hope you can see it in the left bottom, could represent small chemicals, so paracetamol, but even the dot will be probably too big. Then left top, you have the complex biotech, the monoclonal antibody. And then you have the beast on the right. So this is a cell. I think this was a T cell. But just to give you an idea that whereas you can very well control a chemical, you can relatively well control a biotech product to a certain extent. These cells, of course, are then the next big dilemma, because legislation requires that these are also tested and batch released and controlled like another medicine. So you have to adapt and have the framework of these difficulties in mind when you put and develop guidelines and requirements for this type of products. Now, the fact that they are so tricky also will have an impact on your manufacture and your cost of manufacture. And also the batch size will play a role in your cost picture, because if you take a patient-owned cells, autologous situation, the batch will be one. So you will be testing or have to test each batch for each patient. And in Europe, we have approved all type of products. And in a couple of slides, I show you all the products we have approved. So this brings me to the second part of the presentation, just to tell you why we have this specific legislation for ATMPs. So what you have here on the picture is what we had prior to 2009, or end of 2008, when the ATMP legislation came into place. So we have in Europe, and had in Europe at that point, medical device legislation, medicinal product legislation, and already gene and cell therapy products were included into the pharmaceutical legislation since, I think, 2001 or 2003. So there was only one cap, and this was on the tissue engineering. So products that are looking like cell therapies, but have an indication that is not directly linked to treatment prevention or diagnosis of a disease. So we have their type of products for regeneration, repair, replacement of a diseased tissue. So this was one of the reasons for this regulation. Now you can ask why not only make a regulation specific for tissue engineered products. Could have been done, but there was already at that point when the legislation was developed, so 2005 and before and then close after, the realization that the developers of these products are not the normal big pharmaceutical companies. So they took the opportunity of having a uniform framework for these products, also with specific incentives to assist the development of these products. So this was one of the additional reasons for this legislation. And thirdly, it was who could best be involved in the review of marketing authorization applications or license application for these products. And you have here in blue the CHMP, our main committee, which is very experienced when it comes to pharmaceuticals, biotech products. But once you go into the gene and cell products, of course, this expertise becomes more and more specific. So that's why, as a third point, the legislation put into place a specific committee dedicated to these products, so the Committee for Advanced Therapies. So, and this is the legislation that came into force end of 2008, I think it was 30th of December 2008. This is, put in the title, Lex Specialis, meaning that everything of the pharma legislation applies unless if it is specified differently in this piece of legislation. So it is relatively short, so it's 15 pages or something, mainly because a lot of the reference is made to the existing pharmaceutical framework. So definitions are provided for gene, cell, and tissue engineered products, clarified that they are medicinal products, and that they follow the centralized marketing authorization route. So meaning that they will get a license that is valid in the entire EU. The principles of existing legislation apply. That is what I just said, need for a marketing authorization that is based on quality, safety, efficacy demonstration. GMP and GCP will apply to these products, be it adapted to ATMPs, and post-authorization activities. So, Committee for Advanced Therapies, composed of experts from all the member states, plus also experts from representing patients, organization, and clinicians. And the legislation specifies what type of expertise needs to be there. Just this is the little group, or big group is how you want to see it. Ladies in front, like it should be on Women's Day. The tasks of the committee, very shortly. The main tasks are evaluation of marketing authorizations, ATMP certification procedure, ATMP classification procedure. I will just spend 2 minutes on these later on. But we have also additional tasks, support to other committees, involvement in all scientific advices for ATMPs, and then, of course, the involvement in guideline development. So like I said, license applications will follow the centralized procedure, 210-day procedure like other medicines, and this review is done by the specialist committee. Final approval of the opinion remains with our main committee, the CHMP. 10 products approved so far, 3 genes, 3 cells, and 4 tissue engineered products. Unfortunately, you see here there are 4 products that are either withdrawn by the applicant or they are suspended for the moment. The incentives, like I said, the legislation also takes into puts in incentives to assist development. So incentives are at the level of scientific advice, and this is a reduction of the fee for this procedure. Classification procedure, and this is to give regulatory certainty, to developers. So the question is my product yes or no an ATMP? And they can get that answer from the committee. And the last procedure is a certification. It's restricted to small and medium-sized enterprises, so SMEs. And this is for those companies to come here with an initial dossier and asking how far they are more or less in line with the requirements for a future marketing authorization application. So classification, simple procedure, no fee, 60 days, providing regulatory certainty. This is for really early development, so there is no expectation that the product is already in non-clinical or clinical development. All classification outcomes are made public, and you have the link here. And you see that we have about 290 procedures already done until end of this year. You see here also the split of classifications. Not everything we will classify as an ATMP. There are borderline situations where we have to say that, sorry guys, this is not within the frame of the CAT or the agency. Certification procedure, so this is the second ATMP specific procedure. It provides scientific certainty, and what the CAT will review is early or less early quality development data and non-clinical data. Procedure is slightly longer, 90 days with a possibility of a short clock stop. But what is the big advantage is that the companies who submit a request here will get a full assessment, evaluation report, and a list of issues of things to take into account for future marketing authorization, kind of a gap analysis. So what you have done is okay or not okay, but you need to take into account this, this, and this when you submit your application. Not so many procedures, but lately what we see is that this is a bit used by companies to submit already this quality and non-clinical data prior, pretty close, 1 year before they submit a license application, marketing authorization application. So I'm almost at the end. So wrap up is we have this specific legislation that defines what are ATMPs, set up the CAT, provides incentives, describes the authorization procedure. Also, and I will not expand on that one, allows for hospital exemption, and for all the rest it refers to the standard pharmaceutical framework. And this is to close up. So we have, and the analysis we done of all the clinical trials, we have about 500 different ATMPs in clinical development in Europe. we have seen quite a lot of scientific advice requests and classification requests, relatively few license applications, marketing authorization applications, so 19 here, 10 have been approved. There is an increase in marketing authorization applications over the last year and this year as well. So probably we see now a kind of maturation of the field and more products being developed and making it through the full clinical development. So conclude, perhaps this one I can skip because I have been talking about all this during my talk. Thank you for your attention.
So we can take some questions now. Please.
Okay, a very small question. How do you consider fecal microbiota transplantation? Like an advanced therapy? In which group is?
It will not fit under the under advanced therapy legislation because that is requesting products based on recombinant nucleic acids or cells, human or animal cells. So this is the type of product that will be considered as a biological medicinal product in Europe.
But there is a position of EMA in any way about fecal microbiota transplantation?
I don't think we have an official position on that one, but we had already a couple of early interactions with those with developers of this type of products. It's difficult to call them companies because they're more in the hospital field. Yeah.
What we do when we have a product coming to the agency which are not typical, we have what we call pre-submission meetings where we discuss also whether the product fits the definition of a medicinal product. And in that case, we would recommend that the company developing such a product come to the agency early enough to know, because if they are a transplantation, they are not a medicinal product. If they are a medicinal product, they need to abide by the regulation applying to medicinal products. So it depends on this sort of fork that they will have. And we need to see a little bit another discussion. You cannot necessarily answer blankly on this kind of difficult and new product for us.
Because the FDA, I think, took a position on that. They said definitely is a...
They don't have the same definition as us for a medicinal product or drug or biologicals. They have different regulation for drugs and biologicals. So even if they're classified as a biological by FDA, it doesn't mean it's a medicinal product in Europe.
I am Joris van der Putten, the president of International Alliance for Biological Standardization. You probably know that the WHO is following this very closely as well. How is there interaction between EMA and WHO on this, and can you exchange expertise, etc., which is also very important for low and middle income countries? Thank you.
I'm not sure I can give you a complete answer. Of course, we are in contact with WHO on a lot of activities, I would say mainly on the vaccine field, and that's historical. We have ad hoc interactions with them on other developments as well, but it's not as developed as it is for in the vaccine field.
Hello, Simone Macaferri, University of Bologna. I have a question regarding exosome for regenerative medicine approaches. Since in Horizon 2020 there is a call on advanced therapeutics platform, and we are approaching that, and there is some uncertainty discussing with the Commission on whether the exosome for regenerative medicine are to be considered on falling on that regulation, or if it is applies the interpretation that is quite old related to microparticles for renal activities that was denied as advanced therapeutics in the past. Is it something different because of the specificities for regenerative medicine and the metabolism effect, or is it something that in your idea is falling out of this scope? Thank you.
Yeah. Let's put it short. The definition that is used for DG research project is broader than the one for ATMPs. And they are aware and we are aware, but what they want is not to exclude products from their funding mechanism that would not nicely fit in the ATMP definitions as what we have. Is that good or bad? I leave it out. This type of products, if they are not ATMPs, following the pharma legislation, will still be medicinal products. So they will be captured via our standard mechanism and will be reviewed and get assistance from us via the standard mechanism for medicines. But yes, they are slightly broader than our definition for ATMP. So regenerative medicine for DG research is broader than what we have.
Just a comment, which is not 100% politically correct. The problem we have with our legislation has been cut into pieces and bits. So you have product of a certain type, you have medicine product, you have a legislation for devices, you have a legislation for ATMP, which is a subset or extended subset. And so it is actually quite complex because as soon as you are out of the definition, you may find yourself in a gap, which you're neither one or the other. And that makes things difficult for you, makes things difficult for us. Mm-hmm. And also because the people who are going to judge this product, these various technologies, are not the same people. They don't have the same standards and the same legislation. So instead of maybe having a sort of visionary view when the legislation was written, looking at the future, there was more an approach based on the past, on how we approach small molecules. And our legislation is very much based on this model. So there is no continuum between the device and the products. And so this is creating problem. We had the discussion with someone here in the room on this problem of not being able to define the product or having different classification in different member states and at the EU level here at EMA. So it's a bit difficult for everybody. The fact that we have bits and pieces of legislation next to each other, which are not necessarily connected in a proper way. Maybe just something which may be of interest to you as academics is the certification. I think it is intended for SME because it is supposed to give them an element to show to investors that their development is has more chances of being successful because they meet the regulatory requirement. So the idea is that they show their development and their result, they get the certification, and then they can go to investors saying, we can continue, please fund us. So that's the objective of this incentive. It's not for us necessarily only to look at the intermediate steps. It's to make a thing as of financial value, in fact.
Can I add a comment along the line to what Dr. Agnes was just saying? I think that anyway this will be very important for academia as well, especially because academia with this particular product are making alliances with the company to develop and to transfer technology. But before doing that, we need to have we would like to have a validation from EMA demonstrating that there is a great value in the project that we are taking on.
Yeah.
Just comment on the WHO. So there is a resolution in preparation on biotherapeutics and cell and gene therapies, just for information, at WHO.
Any more questions?
So I hope not everyone's asleep. So.
Yeah. So we move on then? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take over from where Patrick has just left. And my presentation is trying to give you a big overview of what is out there, not specifically for academics, but for all the developers, but with a special emphasis on this new stakeholder group for us. So the support, and please take it considering that we are trying here to facilitate something that we don't all have control in-house. So as usual in Europe, it's a very consensual and very get together and make the decisions. In this particular field of ATMPs, we are suffering very strongly this difference. Agnes just mentioned this idea that the same thing, the same therapy, could be considered medicine in one country and not in another. That's a little bit historical at the moment. We have been moving from there for a few years now, and the only way that you have to do that is to get together to share the information and try to make the definitions and the practical application of those definitions as solid as we can. So a lot of work has been done over the last 10 years on that. There may still be some room for maneuver and some room for improvement, for sure, but I don't think now it will happen that Germany says it's a device, France says it's a medicine. So keep with us. We are working in that direction. We are aware, but it looks more simple to solve as it is, as most things in Europe. So in this presentation, I'm only going to pass over these four items. A little bit of the incentives and help at the development moment, during the marketing authorization, what happened post-authorization, and how we are going to try to support the fact that we want drugs in the market, but the main aim is to have drugs in patients. And for ATMPs, it's a little bit of a gap in there. So starting again, which are the tools? You are going to get all these slides, so there will be links to go through. I'm not going to go in detail through every item, but you just heard about this regulation, why it's different from the traditional ones. We have heard this morning a bit of the top layers of the scientific advice and the ITF. We have a lot of guidance already out there, and a lot of it in the making. And then we have the three major stakeholders who are making plans and trying to put the actions in the public domain. As ASEMA, CAT as the main committee within us with the involvement of the network, and the European Commission. Of course, interactions are wide with the stakeholders, but at the moment the plans are being made from that triumvirate. So this is the same slide that you just saw. I just want to remember that for developers, there are a lot of incentives up there. Please do use them. We have feedback from our stakeholders, and at the moment, the developers of ATMPs are unusually laden with all these academics or spin-off, which are very recent spin-offs coming from universities. And we find that those are the stakeholders who do not necessarily know that we exist and what we do. So I hope that after today, you are also going to pass the news and spread the word in your countries and in your ambitus. Moving from the incentives to the support, we have heard this morning about the scientific advice, the ITF, specific innovation and health support for SMEs, the classification and certification, and then for early access, you're going to hear more about the conditional tomorrow, and you heard a little bit about Prime. The reason why I'm putting the finger on all these things is because although not all of them are specifically linked to ATMPs, it is true that ATMPs get a little bit of priority because every time you, for example, try to find who qualifies for Prime, one of the main questions is this a promising therapy for which we don't have much at the moment? And the answer for ATMPs very frequently is yes. And that's why you will find that the numbers are slightly biased towards giving more of the help and the support and the initial love to ATMPs. So for the ITF, you can address it at two levels. If you came directly to our ITF, you heard this morning that it's a limited number between 20 and 30 a year. So they will look at the applications, and the shortcut to explain why somebody is selected versus other, a lot of the time is who will benefit. If you see somebody applying with very loose ideas, hardly any evidence, not much tests done, then you are reluctant because it's so little that you can add. If you already come with some evidence and good plans, good ideas, good thinking, and you know what you want, then you are far more likely to be chosen because you will benefit from it. The same will go when you go to the local, national task forces. Those are more likely done in the local language, and also they will know very well the environment of your hospital or your university. Now, the good thing of this innovation network is that now that we are connected with each other, first, we can give more homogeneous responses, but also we are learning from each other all the time. Because as you can imagine, this is an area that is almost free for all. The ideas sometimes are really mad, and we are all different to different mad ideas. So it's a very good idea to be learning and to find that is new in your country, but you already heard that there was a case like that in Finland or wherever the example is. A little bit of the numbers of where the briefing meetings had been concentrated. You can tell that academia and SMEs are substantially more than half. And then you have the MIT and the others, which are basically the larger industry stakeholders. For scientific advice, again, you have seen this morning, so I'm not going to deal with it, but let me draw your attention to the bottom line. You can ask for scientific advice that is coordinated with the FDA, but most important here, you can ask for scientific advice that is linked with HTAs. HTAs is the health technology assessment bodies that we have talked about, and in the majority of the countries, they are the ones who are going to have a say of when that is reimbursed and what is the price and how is it going to be put in practical in each national health service. So if they are important for any medicine, for ATMP, which are typically going to be very expensive, they will have a lot of infrastructure to use. They will not just be given a pill in the GP. And also they will actually have perhaps transformative effects. They may be that instead of a pill a month or a pill a day, you will end up cured. So they are very difficult to judge, and every country is struggling with this at the moment. What we can do is facilitate that when you are coming for scientific advice, from the beginning you are aware of what is the type of information that I need to collect to satisfy also those stakeholders. So to get into the market and to get into the patient, let's see, there will be many commonalities. The earlier we have that discussion, the more likely you are to know what type of information you need to be collected and producing. So this is the snapshot of scientific advice, and the trend is very clear for ATMPs, but this is no surprise because a lot of research of the past 20 years is now approaching fruition, is now getting more and more closer to this day where all these ideas, or some of them, are going to be become real medicines and get into patients. The star growth is in the red color, which is the gene therapies, which again will be no surprise for people in this room. Prime, you heard this morning, and I'm going to present the same slide with the side information of ATMPs. So as you can tell, there is a lot of ATMPs, and the key messages here is that they are a small proportion of the proposals and a much larger proportion of the accepted, which again, because of the criteria used for the selection, the fact that they should be innovative, that they have the potential to be transformative for the therapy, that they are addressing areas where there are no other good therapies at the moment, all this gives you points as it comes. And if you get yourself into the prime scheme, then you are going to have a lot of help and support. It may end up earlier in the market, but the stress is not just in speed, it's in solidity, to having a good development and to make sure that these very good promising therapies don't just get abandoned because of complications of the process or because the developer didn't have enough help or because the developer is not basically a large, well-established pharmaceutical company. So there is a lot of guidance out there. You have a couple of links here, and I'm going to spend 2 slides just to give you an indication of what we have there. So for cell-based medicinal products, there is an umbrella guideline and then several very relevant guidelines on specific topics. The ones in red are the ones who are very specific for ATMPs. And then for the gene therapy products, similar picture, an umbrella guideline, a lot of guidance, some specific. Some of those you will see that they are in revision and preparation, so a lot of these will be coming over the next year or 2. The reason why for us a revision of a guideline, especially in this area, is not a fast turnaround is because sometimes the changes in the science, the information coming to us, is substantially different. So it is called a revision, but it's a complete revision starting from not from zero because you already have some in there, but they are also done very much in consensus. You put the experts together, you agree, you consult. Sometimes you will find that public consultation is required, and then finally the guideline is approved and put in the website or announced transparent. You also have, of course, the public assessment reports. You know that every time a drug is approved, if you travel through the tabs at the top, you're going to find that a lot of the scientific rationale, the type of information, the weighted of different information is going to be explained there. So although there are not that many ATMPs to look at least it's a small number that will give you a lot of tips about the different weight and the way that the assessment was approached. I want to make a point here that in the previous slide with Patrick, it looked like 19 submissions and only 10 applications is like a bad proportion there. But don't get that to discourage anyone. At the beginning, there is always a lot of negatives. Now we are getting into the up part of the curve with a lot more are coming. We know a lot more. The developers know a lot more. So don't let those numbers discourage you. It's nothing to do with the future, I'm sure. This is the website landing page for ATMPs with several circles. From here, you will access the guidelines that I have been talking a lot, but also other areas of the agency that, although they are not specific for ATMP, they will have very relevant information for you to take. And a small word of what is happened after. The information collection for all the drugs starts very early, and as you will know and will hear a lot more tomorrow, the risk management plan and thinking about the post-authorization collection of information and vigilance is very important for every medicine. In ATMP, this is probably even more important from the point of view that the collection of information is going to be slow and difficult in many cases. The better plan you have in advance is not only that you're going to be making the most of any patients that you treat with the drug, is that you're actually going to have a lot more regulatory assurance. The approval process is always better if you can show from the beginning you have a very good plan of what is going to happen after. So a good example is this CAR T-cell register workshop. This was a closed workshop that we had only last month here at the EMA. And the discussion goes about how to make it work for everybody. So if you, for example, look at the examples of the challenges, you could tell, this harmonization of protocols. We want to collect information in many places, but we really want to collect information that then we can compare with each other. Because if we're collecting a lot of apples here and a lot of pears here, that's not going to help. We want to put together the largest possible number of experience and data and patients. And for that, these coordinations in registries is very, very important. A lot of involvement in this register was coming from the FDA, because of course, this is another area that we need to be aligned, because the emphasis here is to not waste any of the data that we are producing or we will be producing. So to give you a little bit more of detail on the current challenges in this area, I'm using 2 slides who are not mine. They are coming from Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and they are being produced by this ESHRE collaboration, which was sponsored by EBE and FPA. This is the general landscape, which is not that different from the numbers that you had been seeing earlier on in our presentation of where the development is coming from and the big chunks of all the graphs that always the SME get in advanced therapies. But this is a summary that they have put of the challenges that they have encountered. And this has been done talking, I hope that a lot of people in this room talk to them, because they were asking almost anybody in companies or in academia involved with ATMPs. So at the top, you have the European level. And you can see it's more green than red in there, because a lot of things are moving as a whole. We are starting to align countries on all these areas. The GMP at the moment is in red in there, but you may be aware that this big guideline was published last November, I think, finally, some guidance in this area. And the post-authorization is an area that we will continue talking for a long time. Then in the lower part, they are the difficult things that we need to do now at national level. And a lot of that is coming from the fact that the regulation is global, but the national health services are very different. And these are therapies that really need to fit in the hospitals. So you will find that the clinical trial applications sometimes receive very different answers from different countries. The GMO is not harmonized at all. The hospital exception is hospital-based by definition. So you will find a lot of the impediments are connected to the fact that we need to harmonize very, very unharmonized situation at the moment. But we already started to talk and moving in that direction. So I'm hoping that a lot of these are going to turn green next time that they go out and ask how we are doing. So what we are doing to address this situation, very briefly, this is a plan just published last October that we did together with the European Commission and the involvement of the CAT, of course. And this is basically results of an ongoing conversation. We started with a workshop here in 2016. We published a summary, a new document with selected actions February last year. In this plan, you can go through it and see that the actions are being quite wide. The idea here is not just to produce guidance, but also to help at every stage of the development, from talking to investors to trying to get the HTAs involved as early as we can. As I said, some of these areas are outside our control, but we can facilitate by putting people together, providing information, and trying to always have the high viewpoint to try to put it together is our way of facilitating. So you can go through the objectives and you can check the plan, but the main message here is that there is a dispersed, very wide scope, different actions. Some of them will be repeated, some of them will be one-off, but the aim is to keep talking and keep moving. So to finalize the presentation with the take-home messages, you have seen the principles. ATMP are very different, but they are still operating within a very well-traveled road. We just need to make them work and help them along because we know the immense promise and changes that they will bring. The early access tool are there. Please do use it and tell other people to come to us. And the final red line of early engagement is especially encouraged for ATMP is the main message. So if you go home with only one from this presentation, please take that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna.
So we have plenty of time for questions. Sorry, didn't see you. Please go ahead.
Michela Gabaldo, Fondazione Teleton Italy. About the incentives, I think that you're aware that academia do not have the same fee reduction as the small medium enterprise. Consider that, especially in the ATMP area, and especially most of them, they are often orphan drug as well. We are really struggling in accessing. So we'd like to have a scientific advice, protocol assistance, but of course we need to secure a budget that is quite difficult to have in academia, and we ended up in paying exactly the same fee to have access to a protocol assistance as compared to a big giant. So this is quite challenging for us, and even if we are recognizing the importance to early dialogue with the agency, we are struggling doing this. So is there any, I mean...
Okay, perhaps, no, okay, I start.
It's a hot topic that we really like to answer that question, so please.
Yeah, now of course we are aware that this, that academic developments are the starting point for most of the gene and cell therapies. We're very well aware of that. If you are in the lucky situation to have an orphan designation for your product early on, this will facilitate very much the fee issue. Because you have, for fee, it's normally you don't pay for scientific, for protocol assistance. Not, has it been changed?
Sorry, can I give you, so for a non-SME, if you have developed an ATMP, you have a 65% of fee reduction, whereas if you have an orphan drug designation, you have a fee reduction of 75%. So of course, it is anyway a big budget for us, for academia. So that is different from a small, medium enterprise. So sorry, but this is not topic for us, so I'm well prepared.
Well, I don't have the solution yet, but this morning we spoke about the framework of collaboration with academia, and as part of this framework we have an action plan, and one of the actions is to identify the regulatory burden that the academics see when they want to discuss with us. And of course, this issue of the fees is the first one on the list. If you have others, please contact us and tell us what are these this burden that you encounter when you want to speak to academics. But so that's something we will look at. But you know that the fees are, the structure of the fees are defined by legislation. So there is an issue there where we need to discuss with the Commission how we can solve this issue. We have started to discuss as well with DG Research, because in the context of the Horizon 2020, in some cases you are obliged to come to scientific advice or protocol assistance. And of course you will have to pay the fees. So how is it going to work? And so we are discussing with DG Research to see how we can also accommodate for this one. So we are very well aware. We don't have the solution yet. It will take a bit of time because, of course, we will have also to involve the Commission to solve this issue. But this is something we are working upon.
If I may add, we like to be quite proactive. So any pressure that comes from you will make absolutely sure that we translate it into pressure for the European Commission. Otherwise, everybody is always talking and nothing practical happens. And this discussion at the legal level of the Commission are not easy, as Isabella said, but we take a strong stand and say, okay, put your money where your mouth is. And this is not happening, but we want to push for that.
So maybe just an additional word, that's where we need the support from the European Learned Societies and the ERICs. Where is our friend from BBMRI from this morning? So that's where, and ECRIN and the ATRIS and all of them. That's also where we would need some input from you.
Okay, so this is the action part. From what we can do at the moment, a part of being frustrated by it, as you are, because we know that this was made at one time where the people developing drugs were companies. So we are suffering from the fact that the situation is changing and is different now. If you came from an ITF, we try to give you priority. So while we can do a little bit, and ITF is free. So it's a little bit of a continuous. Depending on the amount of information that you have, sometimes the dossier is so mature that we directly tell the applicant, go to scientific advice. What you need is a serious scientific advice now. But there is always a gray area there, and academics are giving no favoritic. I cannot say that they are favorite, but it's very well understood that there is a difficulty in there. So you should try other areas around, and we will help as much as we can.
There is a process that still exists, which is to make a request to the executive director for exceptional fee reduction, and that is a possibility. The times are a bit difficult because the move of the agency is quite costly. So we do not have a very generous budget this year and probably next year as well. But in the past, we were able to use that possibility for sort of exceptional cases. It's not a rule. We went from a 100% fee reduction for scientific advice, protocol assistance, and seeing the success of this procedure, and also that large companies actually are now applying for orphan designation. So we had so many big companies applying that we have reduced the fee reduction, but that is at the disadvantage of academia. So we need to find solutions, and some of them were mentioned on which we are working, but in the meantime, we may find some exceptions.
Hi, Gilly Spurrier, MPNE. More than delighted that you're making these, allowing for these initiatives for ATMPs to come through, but it's very important that when you're making the decisions about these very new products, that the pharmacovigilance afterwards is good. And at the moment, I mean, some of these products, we've actually suffered, I say, one of these projects being approved, and they are very technically difficult to administer. So they tend to be administered in very specific centers, which means that registries are poor. There needs to be some kind of follow-up, I think, when you do approve one of these new, because you start off with some quite heavy restrictions that may need to be relaxed or maybe even more strictly adhered to. But I think you need to not just put it out there and make sure it goes along with the black label or black triangle or whatever. It needs to be much more specifically kind of monitored and governed.
Yes, you are absolutely right. I have to say that the ATMPs are the only products who have 3 committees involved, and partly reflects the complexity, but also the fact that we know that the safety concerns are not minimal here. Those are potentially very dangerous therapies. So we have the CHMP, the committee that you heard this morning, who has the final authorization. We have the special CAT for the advanced therapy, and then we have the involvement of the PRAC. And despite the fact that it's the same time that with other drugs, there is a lot more of interaction. That sometimes is reflected in the fact that these products end up with a lot of post-authorization commitment, which is not anything that to be surprised about. It's a part of the put something that is potentially very good but dangerous as well kept and watched as you can. So it will not be that all the normal pharmacovigilance actions apply. They are substantially upgraded. Part of it. The point of registries is very well taken because everybody recognizes that is the best practical way to do it. So the conversation has started and it will be taken. Agnes?
Anna, you say they are more dangerous. Is it because we don't know and we are a bit risk averse and we are a bit worried about what we don't know, or are they really more dangerous?
It's a very generic sentence. I'm going to put 1 or 2 examples why I mean that they may be even more dangerous. First, the mechanism of action of small molecules, just by the picture that Patrick has put it up there, I don't think I need to go too much into that. It is far, far more difficult to think what if many times and many degrees separated. Then think about these therapies. We're actually going to change the genome. How long do you need to follow those patients to make sure that themselves and their children, okay, we are not going to have 200 years following, but you are actually doing, making alterations that have a potential to go one step above the side effects that we are used with other. Then you have to remember a little bit the environment, which is not just for ATMP, but ATMPs have a lot to do. And all these discussions about, just the small bit escaping from the hospital in a river may create an ecological side effect that we are not expecting. So in many aspects are new therapies, extremely promising, but ones that will require a lot of attention and a lot of follow-up.
Yeah, this is Steve Anderson, FDA. So I just wanted to follow up with that because we wrestle with these issues with FDA on our advanced therapies as well. So I wouldn't call them dangerous outcomes. What I would say is the benefits of these products tend to be really amazing and very promising versus safety concerns. And so I guess one question would be, how long does your sort of long-term follow-up go out to? I think in some of the cases, we're actually going out, 15 years or so. And but there's other things too. There's REMS, there's risk management plans, pharmacovigilance plans that are really careful to make sure that, these drugs are administered in the proper setting, that you can deal with some of the adverse events that might arise. So I think there's a lot of work going on in these areas. These products are so new. The experience level is pretty minimal. But again, I think there's a lot of promise for these therapies.
Thank you. Patrick?
I think you made a very correct statement. The follow-up for these products is anyway long, up till 15 years, and perhaps even that is, for some products, borderline too short. So even after the 15 years, there will still be a need for perhaps a less structured but some patient follow-up. Now, the additional issue is that, let's take the gene therapy. So if you insert something in the genome, you might not see anything, any adverse events for years. And then all of a sudden, after 5 years, something pops up, and you have to take that into account. Now, of course, in the bigger scheme, these products are approved based on known and unknown but expected adverse events, like this insertional mutagenesis, if I talk about genes. For cell products, you have the issue that these products can remain in the body for a long time. If you take a biological or a chemical, they have a certain shelf life, long or short, but after a couple of weeks, nothing is left. For cell therapies, this is the type of products that in some cases are supposed to remain there lifelong. As a regenerative, in a regenerative field, that would be the expectation. So yes, there as well, you will have to have a longer follow-up and a more structured follow-up. So I think that is what the regulators everywhere, because this is not what I have been presented here was a European picture, but we have very strong and frequent links with the other regulators worldwide. And here, I think everyone is having very similar considerations with regards to the long-term follow-up for gene and cell-based products.
And yes, first, and then we go back
I think
to you.
it's really important to remember the benefits. And I actually, my point was not to forget the benefit, because as you said, and the example of insertional mutagenesis is a perfect example. When this was observed after a clinical trial, actually the children who had SCID were treated and cured from their disease, which was a lethal disease, and very rapidly a lethal disease. And they got leukemia, which is a curable disease. So although it was the first, and we have learned from that, it's also taught us lessons for other type of treatment, and this is very useful. I wouldn't recommend that we experiment on children in order to learn but at the same time, this information was not lost. It served to do a better job the following time, and the children were still cured from their disease, even though some of them, apart from one who died, I think, the other had the treatment for their leukemia and survived. So I think the benefit is at a very expensive price. It's not easy for the children and for the parents, but at the same time, that was a completely different perspective from what was the past SCID. I come from Necker Enfants Malades, so I remember these children.
And I just wanted to say that, it's really moving us into new areas. So I think, many times we thought about, our job is really to think about benefits and risks. But we're also starting to sort of, with safety, move into a little bit of, and FDA has sort of shied away from this, but getting into sort of making recommendations for medical practice, which is something which is challenging. Because we don't feel necessarily that's our area, but I can just say one example for a product, for one of the CAR T cell products that was really sort of challenging, is to think about, making sure that those products are administered in proper facilities with experience in the area, but also making sure the drug that you need for the intervention is on the floor. Because if the patient gets a cytokine release syndrome over the weekend, and the $150,000 drug is locked in the pharmacy down in the basement, and it needs to be given within a brief period of time, that's making recommendations about how we should practice. And so again, we struggle with those kinds of decisions, but it's really important. But again, we're having to make new types of decisions into new types of areas that really, again, are just pushing us. So.
Thank you. Please.
My name is Akihiro Manaka. I'm working in Pharmaceutical Evaluation Division of MHW Japan. My simple question is, when are you doing environmental risk assessment for ATMPs containing GM O's.
Okay.
Okay. It's a bit of a complex answer. So in Europe, you have the situation of clinical trials and the situation of marketing authorization. We are here responsible for only the last bit. So the clinical trial approval is at member state level. Now, for any approval of gene therapy, including genetically modified cells, for a clinical trial will require that there is this involvement in Europe of the environmental risk assessment authorities. So the when is already at the stage of the clinical trials. Now, when this has been passed, and of course this has then this interim environmental risk assessment done, then once a product based on genes or genetically modified cells comes to us, within our licensing marketing authorization procedure, we have a consultation of the environmental bodies and an agreement on the ERA, so the environmental risk assessment. So for the licensing set, a product that gets a marketing authorization from us will automatically also have the GMO clearance for Europe. The difficulty is at the level of the clinical trials, which is not centralized like it is for the marketing authorization. I hope that answers a little bit your question.
In Japan, very difficult clinical trial. For example, recombinant virus vector and recombinant arrived virus vaccine. They are okay. I'm sorry.
We can have a discussion after during the coffee break. If that's
a coffee question, that one. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? Okay, please.
I had one for you just on dosing. So these products are fairly complex, and so sometimes it's hard to sort of figure out what the therapeutic dose is if you have a mix of cells. So I was wondering if you had any, I'll put you on the spot, if you had any thoughts about how to deal with therapeutic dosing for complex products.
For cell products, it's very, very tricky because problem there is that what you normally do for dose setting is look at non-clinical testing, try to find if you have some dose response there, and take it from there into clinics, do dose finding in humans, and that would be in your early clinical trials, and that would be your dose. For cell-based products, you already are hampered by the fact that you're putting human cells into animals. So unless if you do a very immune-compromised animal, you will not see anything. And even then, the extrapolation from this skid mice to a normal human is always very difficult. So for cell-based, often you have to rely on what has been tested by the companies in their early clinical trials. How they come to that starting dose, often it is a bit empirical, looking at publications for similar products, and starting from there, I suppose for companies is hoping for the best that it will work, that dose, or will not be toxic. So that's how it often is done for cell therapies. Not super ideal, but even the couple of dose findings, human dose finding studies I have seen, because of the specificity of the product and the manufacturing process, often you have a very limited range that you can apply. often it's only a factor, maximum between minimum and maximum dose, factor 10. So whatever I have seen is that even the fact that the 10 points higher dose cell therapy product is not substantially different or better or worse than the lower dose. So it's very empirical. For gene therapies, you have a little bit more of a leeway. You can rely, hopefully, a little bit more on animal testing. But even there, it's still less easy to set a starting dose for a clinical trial than for a biological or a chemical product. So I don't think anyone has the answer there. Do you have an answer?
Okay, any final question? Thank you all for your questions and your interventions, and I will pass the word to Agnes again.
Yeah, thank you both, Anna and Patrick. Sorry. I just wanted first to, before we go to the coffee break, to first thank my colleagues here who have been preparing these 2 days. And you have Ricardo, who has been the engine of the session, because he has been following, motivating speakers and moderators to deliver on time, and you can see that he succeeded. We have Monica, Clément, who was there earlier, Nora, Sandra, and our 2 trainees, Arianna and Maria, but also Monica, who has been representing the interest of academia, and I would like to thank them for this exercise. You cannot imagine the work behind. It's quite an exercise, and they have been very successful, and thank you very much. My other colleagues from the International Affairs, Martin, who was there earlier, Sabine, and Tanya, who is in the US currently. And I think they deserve a round of applause, because it's a big work. And so now we can have the coffee break. Just remember that after the next session, we will have the photo, so we will go outside. Again, you can leave your things while we're doing that, and we'll take the photo outside, because it doesn't seem to be raining. And we will go, after the photo, we will go to the -1, where we have prepared drinks to allow you to relax and get your brains a little bit back to normal after all this information, and talk to us between yourselves, and have a nice evening. Tomorrow morning we start at 8:30, so please be there on time, because we are really on the core of what we do here, which is benefit risk assessment, and we've brought someone from the CHMP, or approval committee, to explain how they reach the conclusion, the scientific conclusion, and what the role of experts. And then we will see also how we deal with other aspects. So that's what I wanted to say at this point in time. Thank you very much.